Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it. For those that will be viewing the presentation via a video, the link will be sent out to you here shortly. Again, wanted to thank you for showing up today. We know your time is valuable, and we'll do our best to make sure that you walk away from our presentation with what you think is valuable information. We will have lunch to go along with the hors d'oeuvres shortly, so hopefully you save some room. Today we're going to have a presentation by Mike Wegner with KIS, as well as Alex with Arctic Wolf, and Bill with Cato, and how the different technologies complement each other. For those of you who don't know about KIS, we have been doing business in the greater Silicon Valley, Northern California area since 1988. We have a number of different practices, being security, infrastructure, professional services, cabling, etc. And we welcome any and all questions on your projects going forward. With that being said, I'm going to keep it short up here, but I looked up a definition of cyber threats, and what I got back was, why did the computer go to therapy? And the answer was, because it had too many bites from past hacks. And if you like that joke, it was mine. If you don't, it was on ChatGPT. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Mike, who will go over cyber insurance from our KIS point of view. You ready, Mike?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Quick show of hands for the folks here in attendance. Who has cyber insurance already? So a couple folks already. So cyber insurance, of course, is a necessity, as you would probably expect for incident response. There's going to be a lot of activity that could span days or even weeks in terms of the investigation, the recovery efforts involved in that. And that can come with some significant costs. In addition to that, if there are other organizations involved, breach of customer data or information, there may be some legal fees or actions that come associated with that. In addition, if you have different requirements for regulatory, such as GDPR, CCPA, you may be subject to certain fines. Lastly, of course, if this incident does take significant amount of time to recover, your business will likely be suffering an impact to your revenue. That can be short or long term. And insurance will help cover these costs. So, why is insurance so costly? Of course, these companies base that cost off of certain risks. And how do you as an organization reduce these risks? That's with tools in your security stack. They're going to look for things like your access control, at your firewall, ACLs. If you have any sort of zero trust software in your stack. The concept of least privilege, only allowing people access to the things they absolutely need to get access to. Multi-factor authentication, this is probably one of the single easiest things to add a level of CYA to your organization. Okay, passwords can be attacked and breached in a number of ways, some more easy or difficult than others. But if you have MFA in place, it gives you another level of protection in the event those credentials are breached. Endpoint detection and response. Long gone are the days of simple antivirus protection. You need something real time, and that's able to detect different anomalous behavior happening in your network. Email security filtering, right up there with MFA, in terms of being able to proactively prevent phishing and other sorts of threats that come into your organization. Prevention is a great way to mitigate those risks. When it comes to backup and recovery plan, you need to have backups that are usable, right? You need to have multiple copies of these backups as well. Best practice recommendation here is the 3-2-1 rule, where you have 3 copies of your backups, 2 on with 2 different media types and 1 offsite. Now, you have these backups, but are you actually testing these backups to make sure they're effective, that you have the data that you need on them? Data encryption. Of course, if someone were to get that far into your network with a breach, you want to make sure that that data is not readable at rest or in transit. Secure remote desktop services. Going back to your remote access, this relates to multi-factor authentication as well. You want to make sure that people coming into your organization are doing so securely, and again, with like your access control, that they're only getting to precisely what they need to get to. Your information security policy. This is the standards for all of your devices and servers on the network. Not only that, but how your admins and your users use that network and those services in your organization. Your incident response plan, similar to your backup and recovery plan. It's good if it exists, but are you testing it? Are you making sure that the people in your organization know what their responsibilities are in the event of a response? And awareness training. This is probably one of the greatest things you can have in your organization are people that are aware of risky emails and things that can happen in the organization, what they need to do if they encounter one of these, for instance, phishing emails. One thing you can even do is incentivize the user response with, say, a bounty program. So these are all different things you can have in your security stack that will help reduce your risk. But when it comes to showing the insurance company, they're going to want proof, right? So to say we have our plan, we have a policy, a procedure, and that you can actually produce to them, that's great. Do you also have meeting notes from a review with all of the executives and leadership team having seen and signed off on everything in this policy? From there, in your security stack, do you have logs that are reporting that your security tools are doing what they're supposed to be doing? From those logs, are you generating reports that aggregate that data into meaningful data that can be used? From those reports, are you evaluating your risk? Are you getting data about the vulnerabilities in your network? From those risks and vulnerabilities, are you then testing those to see what are actually exploitable? So all of these things together give you a level of proof that would be required from your insurance to show that these controls are in place. And with that, we have some members from Arctic Wolf to help explain how they can achieve these.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm Alex. I'm with Arctic Wolf, and I'm here to talk about our view of insurance, insurability, and frankly, overall risk management approaches from the standpoint of a vendor who provides security operations for a living. So that's kind of our bread and butter. generally speaking, when you look at insurance, how much insurance you need, how little of it you need, you really are looking at specific areas of ability to transfer risk. So really the question is, do I need to transfer risk? How much of it do I need to transfer? What can I do to reduce that or perhaps increase that amount of balance? Some of the risk, and primarily that's what we focus on, is letting organizations or build them up to where they can mitigate their own risk. So that is very largely kind of a security operations mandate, is to build up the technology, talent, procedures to do that. There's going to be a significant chunk of that that will be unaddressable because it's impractical to implement, so it needs to be transferred to some other tool, oftentimes a financial tool, which is what the insurance or insurance plans rather represent. And then there's also the option of accepting the risk, right? Sometimes that's the only thing you can do. As long as you're doing it knowingly and you understand what it is that you're accepting, it's a viable strategy. So Arctic Wolf, specifically, we play in this area of mitigation, but we also have some hooks and at the very least visibility into the risk transfer and insurability as well. So kind of the standing joke with us is that there's really two ways of becoming an Arctic Wolf customer. One is to meet with Arctic Wolf representative or your KIS partner, or get breached and then meet your insurance representative, and your incident responder will be Arctic Wolf in many cases. So we would much rather prefer the first avenue, but we have enough exposure and kind of view into that darker after the boom world to where we kind of have our picture and understanding of what the insurance providers are looking for when they look at you as a future customer, how they assess you in terms of the risk. And this is basically a description of that. Probably the best way to articulate that, if I were to assess you in terms of the viability as a customer, and I worked for an insurance company, which I don't purport to do, I would try to place you somewhere on this continuity or your maturity stage. We refer to it as the security maturity ladder. And really, if you think of it, probably the vast majority of the customers, at least that we encounter, are somewhere between phases 1 and 3 in this. And really, you can kind of see where those are, how they stack up. Most organizations at the lowest stage of this maturity would have mostly technical controls in place. So you can call them security controls, but they're oftentimes IT controls. You know, like your Active Directory, for example, it's a security tool, but it's also something that your IT will not run without, for instance. Things like firewalls, fairly basic antivirus or endpoint protection tools. So those are core investments that, frankly, in the eyes of many insurance providers, are minimum or even in some cases below minimum. I'll talk about that in a moment, but just because you are doing some things, you have some security investments, you simply may not be underwritable in many cases. And that was a bit of a shock, I think, to some of our customers in the last, I think, 3-4 years because of the rise of ransomware. There's been a bit kind of reconsideration along those lines by the security providers or insurance providers. As you elevate your game a bit, you start looking at companies that start investing in more of an aggregated view of their technology. They're actually, instead of just having protective controls, they also look at ways to monitor it for their efficacy. So that starts seeing customers implementing log aggregation tools or SIM. They start implementing partnerships with MSSPs, third parties that can actually help watch certain things. This is where you start hearing about companies that have a partner that manages my firewalls, for example, that types of conversation. So it's not a coherent picture yet, but at least they're going in the right direction. So at this stage, you're looking more like a viable, although not ideal customer for an insurance company. As you go up that ladder, so threat intelligence, kind of understanding not just of, yeah, it's dangerous out there, but also I'm in certain industry, I'm in this segment, I'm dealing with these suppliers. What does that actually mean for me at this point in time? So that's what threat intelligence is. And also having some kind of automation. Typically customers at these lower stages find themselves as IT employees or leaders having to fence the security needs. So there's no security defined function, so it basically by default falls onto IT guys. So this is where you actually start implementing some automation capabilities. Instead of just something blindly going to some email alias, you have either a process for tools triggering automated response, or at least notifying the right people at the right time. And there's this where you actually start seeing at least some consideration for proper incident response. So you may not have somebody signed up officially to do it for you, but at least you know that if we have this event and it concerns my executive's email account, or we have this particular event on my server infrastructure, you kind of have an idea, or maybe actual playbook or policy penned in somewhere, so you know what to do. So as you go higher up this ladder, things get interesting and more advanced. I think where, not just us, but I think the industry as a whole, and this is substantiated by things like NIST Common Security Framework. So like the view is, higher you go up this ladder, obviously better protected you are, more insurable you are. So for us as a vendor, as a security operations partner, we're trying to help customers walk up that ladder. And so in higher stages here, you start dealing with SOC as a service from someone like Arctic Wolf, or other partnerships, or your own in some cases, if you're fortunate enough to actually be able to hire someone. You actually have an incident response team defined. It doesn't have to be an internal team, could be an external team, but it's something that's part of your line of sight. You have risk management strategy, so instead of just doing like in many cases, complementary vulnerability scan by some vendors, or like once in a 6-month scan for vulnerabilities, which gives you a very narrow snapshot. You're doing it continuously. You actually have a process of understanding those risks, patching, etc. So it's a full-fledged program. And then kind of the pinnacle of all this, and this is something that was introduced fairly recently, or I should say articulated. We always knew that, but this was really articulated very well in the most recent edition of NIST Common Security Framework. So for those of you in the know, CSF now has version 2.0. It's been out for about a year, almost to the day. Prior version 1.1 was around for about 10 years. And really the main difference, like these domains of identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, they've been there for years. What's interesting with 2.0 is this introduction of, I would say, extra dimension. So it's governance. And really the idea with governance is that you're not just checking for certain checkboxes within these control areas or these domain areas. You're actually looking at things like, how broadly are they implemented? You have a policy, great, the box is checked, but how often is that policy reviewed? And then also, for example, if you have certain controls deployed, I don't know, endpoint protection, it's in use, wonderful, the box is checked. Is it deployed across 100%? Maybe it's 60%, right? Just because you're partially deployed, that should be, so to speak, partial credit, right? And the idea is to give people a path and a way to kind of improve gradually. You can't boil the ocean across all of that. I think that was the mistake originally. It was very binary. You either covered or not covered, or the box is checked or not checked. So this is basically, by looking at this, you can use NIST, you can use this very basic strategy of kind of understanding your stages. You can be very real with yourself and realize, I need help. And that help could be in me trying to get a more comprehensive insurance policy, which may be difficult and pricey. And subsequently, you can talk to someone like KS and Arctic Wolf and other providers and actually walk up that ladder, which is good for you in the long run anyways. And then you can get more insurable and get that policy, which, it's not just about you wanting or not wanting the policy. In many cases in today's climate, it's a must-have, because other people will not do business with you because you're becoming a supply chain risk to them. So it's that game now. So let's take a look at some of the specific impacts and what does that look like in terms of insurance companies. So again, I'm going back to the insurance agent persona here, but just like that ladder I explained, if I were to consider one of you for my customer, I would try to place you into these 3 buckets. So this is something that we see through interaction with our security cyber insurance partners. When they assess a customer, you'll be either, in those 3 buckets, or you will not even make a bucket. So what's interesting to Michael's earlier point when he was going through some of the controls that are kind of table stakes nowadays. 3 years ago, for example, multi-factor authentication was kind of a nice to have. People knew it's an important thing to do, but they were dragging their feet. Today, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, you're very unlikely to get insured. It's one of those things that to even get into the lowest minimum requirements bucket, there's some specific controls that need to be implemented by customers. That didn't exist 3, 4, 5 years ago. Ideally, you want to find yourself in these other, so it's kind of like minimal, better, best buckets, and you can see the types of controls that need to be implemented for you to qualify. And from the standpoint, this is like an actual quote from one of the executives at an insurance company that we work with. In their experience, kind of the spread between a customer who is in this minimum bucket and their best bucket, it could be anywhere, between 25 and 30% in terms of the cost of the premium to them, which is not insignificant. And in our own experience too, this is something that we periodically survey our customer base on. It pretty much tracks. We basically see people who have become customers of Arctic Wolf have corroborated that their renegotiated insurance rate is much better. There are some crazy stories there where we had one team that was basically signing a contract with a company executive, and the proposal from Arctic Wolf on the table was less than their insurance will be in savings. It was basically paying for itself and leaving like 10% of money coming back, which is crazy. So that kind of tells you how low their maturity level was to begin with, and they were overpaying on insurance. It's very rare, but it happens. So this is not an insignificant amount. So you can look at the specific areas of upping your game in terms of your own mitigation or security operations. Some of the areas where you can improve your cyber insurance standing, it's not just about lowering your premium. It's nice to pay a quarter less. That's wonderful. But there's other parts. So for example, the likelihood of you getting broader and higher coverage is also going to be there if you are higher up that ladder of maturity. Arctic Wolf and other vendors as well who play in this field, we tend to have our own supplemental warranty programs. So if you are a customer, you get a certain amount of money toward a specific event, should that event occur. And so the way to look at that is if you have a deductible in an insurance plan, that pays for that deductible. So it's kind of gives you a more comprehensive gap-free coverage, if you would. And then there's some unicorn programs out there that we've seen some plans, some insurance policies that they actually straight up reimburse customers who have demonstrated their improved security policy by partnering with someone like us, and they literally get cash back, which is always nice. Bit of a landscape here. So these are the companies that we deal with as we deal with cyber incidents. So that second way of getting to know Arctic Wolf, where somebody is breached and they come to us through their insurance providers. This is the landscape. I think the important recognition here is that it's not, there's carriers and there's brokers, so those are slightly two different beasts. But there's also a significant component that's overlooked, that's law firms. So the legal side of it, when things really go boom, it's not just about who's going to pay for it. There's a lot of legal entanglements. There's a significant component about comms, properly explaining to the world what's going on. You don't want to scare your partners. You don't want to scare your customers. So again, shameless plug, but this is something that's the world that we are very well aware of. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need help, we are very much prepared to handle that. Before I pass the mic to my colleague at Cato, I wanted to share a couple of freebies, actually one main freebie. So this is something that's available to our customers and now actually to anyone who wants to give it a shot. We have a tool that's available to pretty much anyone who wants to self-assess and kind of understand where they fit as far as their overall, first of all, their cyber resilience profile and how it translates into their insurability. So you can register for it on Arctic Wolf. There's links for that. But basically, it gets you into the self-assessment portal where you can pick a preferred framework. I mentioned NIST 2.0. We actually have a whole number of them that you can specify. This is a very condensed framework. We're not having you self-assess against the entire framework. That will take forever. These are like the MVPs for each category, for each of the frameworks. So you could take, like, let's say, CIS top 8, or there's a couple of Canadian frameworks, UK, and even an Australian one. So that basically lets you self-assess and understand what your risk profile is. And the way that's done is when you go through this, you pick the categories, specific controls. So if you're familiar with NIST and frameworks, so like you're not new to that, you can actually go and pick specific controls, and then within those controls, you will be able to specify your level of maturity. And this is what's interesting. This is something that NIST 2.0 introduced, is there's a policy itself, whether it's implemented, or control itself, but there's also how broadly it's implemented. So there could be, you get points for fractional implementations, and also how often is it revisited. Like, it's not a static policy, it's something that gets looked at periodically. So this ends up translating into your total score with respect to that particular framework. So another way of doing that is, maybe you're not particularly familiar with security frameworks, you're more on the IT side, so you can pick a product. So for example, Cato Networks, right? Like, if you're using them, or specific, I don't know, Active Directory, or specific EDR or AV product, you can specify that category here, pick the degree to which it's implemented again, so it could be fractional or complete, and then that factors into your score. The idea here is that as a user of this, you will periodically self-assess, and you will have an ability to demonstrate to yourself, your leadership, and insurance companies your progression of improvement, right? So this is something that you can do yourself. You can delegate within your organizations. You don't have to do it all alone. You can even lean on partners like KAS for this, assign them some of those roles. And really the idea is to demonstrate how much you've improved over time. And it's just kind of a good way to show it to yourself that the progress has been made. You can publish this as a formal document. So this is something that, again, could be shared with the executives. But yeah, this is one of those free tools, I think, that you don't have to burn a lot of calories on, and the results are pretty obvious. You will, at the end of this, see not just the ranking within specific security framework, but what I like about it is it'll tell you which bucket within the insurance world, so to speak. If you look over here, let's see if I can go back a bit. This bucket view here, this is insurance provider's view of you as an organization. How many of your controls are in the good standing? How much of them are in the excellent? How much of them are lacking? So this is something that you would leverage when you have a conversation with your insurance broker next time. So with that, I will hand off to my colleague at Cato Networks, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions for Alex? Yeah, there's one.
Yeah, it's a self-assessment. If you go to arcticwolf.com, you can look for Jumpstart keyword, and what you were looking at was cyber resilience assessment. So it's you can register for it and get into this portal and essentially self-assess at your leisure. So, and then as a customer, you can do that periodically and on an ongoing basis. That's the vision for that.
Thanks, Alex. As always, a great job. Thank you. So up next is Bill Becker with Cato. If you're not familiar with Cato Networks, they secure your network traffic east, west, north, and south, also known as SASE. So, Bill, you ready to go? Yeah. Go for it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good. How are you? So I'm a regional director here at Cato. I've also got a couple of my colleagues here in the back of the room. So at the end of my presentation, I'm going to ask for questions, but if you think of something later, you can reach out to me or one of my colleagues. I think, well, one of the two of them has a name tag. Oh, they both have name tags on. Great. So I'm here to mostly talk about SASE and how it relates to security compliance. So some of the challenges that customers have as it relates to compliance are data security, right? You want to protect sensitive information from unauthorized access. That's kind of like job one for security professionals, protecting data. There are tons of cybersecurity threats that are out there, whether it be ransomware, phishing scams, this kind of thing. It's funny, I was talking to a prospective customer last week, and he told me that some hackers got into his network, and they're a medical company, and got in and grabbed a bunch of data of their customers and patients, right, highly sensitive data, and then asked them for $1 million in ransom for that. So they got their cyber insurance company involved, and a negotiation ensued, and they ended up talking them down to $200,000, and the insurance paid it, which is kind of nuts. And he told me that the insurance company told him that, as far as hackers go, these guys were like pretty nice and easy to deal with. And I thought, wow, pretty nice terrorists. Obviously the cybersecurity threats, ransomware, is a terrible thing. Oh, he also told me that his cyber insurance rates went way up following that. Data breaches, right? These could be intentional or accidental. Data gets exfiltrated. This is very bad for companies. It can cause reputational damage. All kinds of bad things come from that. Access governance. It's important for organizations to know who is accessing what data and where is that data. And it can be very complex, especially if you're using multiple different tools from different vendors to try to figure out and control that access. Resource constraints, particularly with smaller organizations, it can be difficult to keep pace and to have the budget or the personnel to keep track of all this stuff. And then finally, the technology landscape changing so rapidly, it's hard for organizations to keep pace, to be able to protect and defend their organization from this rapidly changing landscape of threats. So that's where SASE comes in. SASE, it's kind of a funny name. People say sassy. It was actually a term that Gartner, the industry analyst, created circa 2019. Gartner saw a problem that organizations were dealing with, an ever-expanding stack of networking tools and security tools that were causing tool sprawl in an organization. And so Gartner saw that the ideal vision for organizations going forward and in the future at the time in 2019 was to have a single consolidated service that provided all the networking capabilities, WAN acceleration, SD-WAN, network as a service, decryption, and coupling that with all the important security tools, whether it be firewall as a service, CASB, DLP, these kind of things. And so Gartner put this term, SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. It's an acronym, and that's what they said that companies should move toward, that kind of an organization. Having all these tools create complexity. If you have different tools from different vendors, maybe you have one tool from a firewall vendor, you're using somebody else for your DLP. Maybe you've got a different solution for the remote users to connect. This creates complexity. If you do get it to work, you've got to constantly manage it to get these things to continue to play nice together. And then obviously complexity creates blind spots, and blind spots are the enemy of cybersecurity. So Gartner also went on to define what makes an ideal SASE. It ideally should be delivered from a single vendor. It should be delivered from the cloud native. And then that network should be in every geography that a company needs it, whether you're regional or global. So Asia Pac, Latin America, EMEA, North America. And then that SASE service should be delivered on a network that has, as I mentioned, POPs in every geography. Low latency, it's got to be, perform well. Otherwise, who's going to want to use it? No one's going to want to use it. Guaranteed uptime. Have all security and networking capabilities delivered from every POP. No restrictions on where the SASE service can be delivered to. And then finally, it's got to be scalable for companies that are driving high bandwidth. The SASE service has to be able to accommodate that. So how does SASE work? I don't know if you could see that. It's kind of small. When customers ask me, how does SASE work? I have a simple definition that SASE is intended to securely connect all users and branches to all applications wherever those users are anywhere in the world and wherever those applications reside. Whether it be a SaaS application, the application is somewhere on-prem, or sitting in a public cloud somewhere, AWS, Azure, etc. So that's the basic concept of what a good SASE will do. The SASE should be identity-driven and conforming to ZTNA principles. So ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, it's pretty much just how it sounds. You're not going to trust any device or any user without first authenticating, validating that user. And then secondly, you want to give that user only access to those applications that that user is authorized to get access to. And then certainly you don't want to let any remote user actually on the network. Once, like traditional VPN, once it grants access, it lets those users actually on the corporate network. And that's a bad idea because they can run a couple commands, they can see what's available out there. Hackers love that kind of stuff. So SASE abstracts the users from the corporate network and then gives that user a secure connection only to those applications that they need. And that complies with Zero Trust Network architecture. Ideally, cloud native, so it can adapt, it can scale with users and as the company grows. Support for all edges, so wherever those branches are, wherever those users are, whatever type of device that user is using, SASE will be able to connect to that, do posture checks on the actual device, making sure that the OS level and the device is compliant with what the corporate standards are. And then finally, for it to be global. So whether it should be able to service customers that are regional in nature, have offices, say, all in California, or companies that are doing business overseas, EMEA, China, etc. So that is the concept. So what are the benefits? So SASE improves agility. Having a cloud-based service to do the security means that you'll be able to spin up a new user. You should be able to spin up a branch oftentimes in just minutes. So it's highly flexible and it lets companies be incredibly agile in how they're delivering security. It improves security because since all networking and security capabilities are being delivered from a single consolidated service with a single dashboard, it makes it very simple. So you eliminate those blind spots I was talking about by having multiple vendor solutions deployed and having to use log into different consoles to be able to manage your network and security infrastructure. So SASE drives that complexity out, makes it very, very simple. And then finally, because it's a cloud service and it's being delivered that way, it's autonomous. It's self-healing. The SASE cloud can reroute traffic around problems that are on the internet or within that service. Also, it requires no manual maintenance, so no more patching firewalls, no more critical vulnerability notices from vendors that then your security admins have to go out and patch a firewall or add a patch to a security solution. A proper SASE gets rid of all of that. So coming back to compliance, this is how those things are addressed. So on the topic of data security, I mentioned The zero trust architecture prevents any unauthorized user anywhere from accessing anything that they shouldn't have access to. For the cybersecurity threats, the SASE delivers intrusion prevention, DNS, these type of technologies that prevent phishing, ransomware attacks, etc. Data breaches, having DLP and CASB delivered and native to the solution means that you can protect sensitive data from any type of data leakage. Access governance, because everything is centralized, policy is centralized and managed from a central location and delivered to all users wherever they are. It makes access governance incredibly simplified and easy. Resource constraints, because now it's a single service and you're replacing multiple solutions. Smaller companies can lower their operational costs to be able to run it, and by replacing multiple solutions, actually the acquisition costs can be much lower. And then finally, since it's a service that's being managed, it's constantly keeping pace with the rapid change of technology. So customers no longer have to worry about that. So now the part of the shameless plug. So my company, Cato Networks, has the world's leading SASE platform right now. We've got over 90 POPs globally. We promise sub 20 millisecond latency for any user anywhere in the world to connect to one of our POPs, and we guarantee a 5 nines SLA. Every one of those networking and security capabilities that I started with is resident in every POP. So that makes our network and our solution incredibly fast. We don't have any restrictions like some of the hyperscalers might have. And we offer up to 10 gigs for any location, any branch location that needs to connect to the network. You can kind of see it here, and it's also here. Last year, Gartner named us as a leader for single vendor SASE. We've been recognized by really all the major industry analysts as a leader in this space. And just this month, GigaOM released their latest tech radar, and that color is kind of hard to see, but Cato's in the leadership position. So you want to be on this part of the target and then close to the target, and that's where we are. So long story short, we can help you, secure everything, simplify networking and security management. So please, you can come talk to me or talk to one of my colleagues, and I would be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Bill. Have tons of swag over here. Please take some home for yourself or your coworkers, your kids, what have you. And I know that we served you some food earlier. We have more now. So please take advantage of it. With that being said, I want to say thank you again for being here and participating. And we look forward to talking to you in the near future about what's on your agenda. Thanks so much.